Hi everyone, it's Jane from Quilter's Palette. As many of you know, I'm situated in Pritis, which is in the beautiful foothills of the Canadian Rockies, just outside of Calgary, Alberta. Quilter's Palette is a barn quilting business where I provide classroom instruction and also have numerous items in my shop. So supplies, anything that you would need to paint a barn quilt. And of course I carry gift items as well. So today's video is actually going to be twofold. I'm going to share some new things that are happening, sort of kick off 2024 and things that'll be occurring this year. And also I'm going to do an instructional portion, which will be on how to grid your barn quilt. And I use a method. I've done this for several years, and people are always in awe when they see it, and they can't believe they haven't been doing it that way all along. It's a method that doesn't involve any measuring and no math. So it's super easy and quite quick. So there'll be an instructional part following this introduction here. And then there's also a short clip afterwards of me doing a second one without any narration. So you can see exactly how quick and easy it is. So to start with, so this year I am again doing a number of classes and shows. So classes are typically where a shop or a quilt guild has invited me out, and they have a large number of women or men who are interested in painting a barn quilt. And so we organize a class. Shows can be either, it might be a quilt show, it could be a farmer's market, that sort of thing, where I go and I have a booth and have my items and products for sale. This year I'm really excited. I've actually been invited to Sunnybrook Farms in Red Deer, not once but twice. So I will be there in May for their Spring on the Farm. I believe that's May 25th. And then I'll be there again in August for their Pioneer Days. So that's a new event for me. So I'm quite excited about that. And of course, I'm just going to check my notes. We've got classes coming up in the next 2-3 months here. I've got next one's in Millerville, Lethbridge, and Strathmore. So if you're in any of those areas, those classes are open to registration. I'm going to put links on below the video with all links to all these, where my classes are and some of these products that I'm showing you today as well. So I do plan this year to do more videos, simply because I find it's a little quicker than writing out a newsletter and doing all that. So as you may have noticed, I'm not in my studio today. We had a good dump of snow on the weekend and I didn't feel like going out to start the fire. So I'm actually in the private suite in our home. We have a vacation rental in our home. It's called Galloway Nest, and people are welcome to come rent it any time of year. Now, again, I'll include the link for that. And some people do come and book both a quilt class, a barn quilt painting class, and the suite, so they can enjoy the whole weekend in our peaceful little hamlet. So I'm just going to switch the camera around here so you can see some of the things I've brought in to show you. So, so this year I'm going to be carrying these puzzles. They're from the Suns Out in the United States. So they're all made in the US, and of course I've chosen all quilt related puzzles. Most of them are 1,000 piece. I do have a couple that are 500, but I have quite a wide selection, and so I'm really excited about this. I think they'll make a great addition to some of the shows that I've been attending. I also got in a new shipment of coasters. Now these I've actually carried for quite a few years, but some of you may have seen them before. So these are stone coasters, and they're absorbent, so they're quite nice. When your glass perspires, it sucks up the moisture, so when you lift up your glass doesn't stick to it. So the other thing, so actually I'm also, most of you may know, I've been posting a lot about it. I will be at Quilt Canada this year. So Quilt Canada is sort of a combination. I'll be a vendor there, so I will have my booth at the venue, and I will also be hosting a workshop. And it will be on this particular pattern, which is Love's Blossom. And as you can see, there's a number of different color combinations. And the early bird pricing for Quilt Canada actually ends tomorrow, and there are just 5 spots left. All right. Just wanted to close with one of the other things I'll be doing this year, which is quite significant for my Barn Quilt painting classes, is that I'll be moving from MDO, which is medium density overlay. It's a signed plywood. I'll be moving that from that to aluminum. And I'll actually probably do a completely separate video on that, just to go through the pros and cons of each and the reasoning behind doing the switch. At any rate, thank you very much. As I say, coming up is a great video on how to grid a board without any math or measuring, and take a lot of headache out of the prep, so you can get on to the good stuff of creating your board. If you like this or find it useful, please like my Facebook page, my YouTube channel, follow me, share the video. Thank you very much. All right, so as mentioned earlier, today I'm going to show you a fast and easy way to draw a grid on your board. But first of all, we'll start with why you draw a grid. So drawing a grid on the board first is like having graph paper in front of you. And most blocks, not all, but most are based on a grid. That is, that you could divide them up by blocks. And if you're not sure, I usually suggest to students that they print the block out in black and white. And I do have these on my website at quilterspalette.ca. I have over 50 to choose from. They're all in black and white already. So just print it off. And then when you look at the pattern, look for the straight lines. I usually start in the middle. Okay, yeah, there's a line there and a joint here as well. If you're a quilter, you'll know that these are seams. But then it could also be broken down further. There's another line there that then would dissect through those 2 triangles. So take a highlighter and actually draw over top of it, and then you'll see how it becomes a grid. Now, this one's pretty straightforward, but then we have others, like this one, for example, that looks more complicated, but it's really not. Once you start looking at where the lines are and where things are dissect, you'll see that it's nothing but squares, and if you're a quilter, you know there's also half square triangles in here. So when you break it down, you end up with a grid. Now, this prior one was 4 by 4, so 4 across each side basically, and then this one is 8. So that's what we're going to show you today, is how to do a grid that has 4 by 4 or 16 equal squares, or an 8 by 8, which means it has 64 equal squares. We'll just set this aside. Now, when it comes to drawing out a grid, I've seen many methods online. The most common that I see is people taking their yardstick, measuring how wide their board is, dividing it by the number of squares they need, and then going on one side and making little ticky marks, and then going to the other side and making their ticky marks, and then likewise the other way and drawing their lines. And it certainly works. Where it gets frustrating though, or where it can get frustrating, is if you're using MDO, your board's not going to be 24 inches simply because of losing a little bit of board every time they cut it. So this one, as an example, is 23 7/8, which is quite common. I've had some of them end up as small as 23 1/2. And then of course, when you're dividing by 8, now you've got fractions, and most people get frustrated right then and there, and they just want to get to the fun part of painting the barn quilt. A lot of people opt to use metric, and here in Canada we do have meter sticks, and yeah, sure, using centimeters is a lot easier, but you still end up with some small numbers. Other people suggest, well, don't worry about where it ends up, start in the middle, work your way out, and whatever's left over is the border. Well, that's great if you want a border and you don't care what size it is, but you might want a border a certain size to incorporate an element. And then in that sense, you want to know how to draw your grid within that square that's left. So this method I'm going to show you, doesn't matter what size the board is. You don't need to measure it. You don't need to do any math. You do need a ruler that will at least go diagonal, or not even a ruler, just needs to be a straight edge. When I do larger ones, I use a piece of tile edging. It's metal, so it's a nice straight edge. It's probably not called tile edging, but that's what it's used for. So anyway, it just needs to be able to go from corner to corner. And then you need a ruler that has, I like to use this one, which is a drafting ruler, a drafting T-square. A drywaller's T-square would work as well. If you're a quilter, you probably have one of these. Hopefully it's not busted like mine. So this one's retired from my sewing room and is now in my studio. So this will work as well. I'll show you how to use each of these. And the other thing that could work is a carpenter's square. So we'll get started here, and then I'll show you an example of how to use each of those. So you don't need all of them. You just need one option to choose from. So the first thing we're going to do is to draw a diagonal line from one corner to the other. Now I use a highlighter, a water-based highlighter. And this you can remove later on if you choose. If you don't want to, or if it doesn't quite all come off, it's not a problem. You can paint right over top of it. So we go from corner to corner. So now what that has done, it has shown us the middle of the board, the very center of the board from each side. And this has been done without any measuring or calculations. So then what we'll do is we'll take our T-square and we will draw us a line straight across, but go dissecting through that center point. So you can see with this square against the edge, it gives a nice right angle, and that'll be a perfectly straight line across. Now, if you don't have one of these, not a problem. If you have a quilting ruler, likewise, you can use it. And you just have to feel at the edge to make sure it's lined up. Or you can also use your yardstick, standing it up so that it's braced against it. And then draw your line. All right, so that's one way to use the quilting ruler. Now, the next step, so at this point, you can see we have 4 equal quadrants. And if your block or your pattern only had 4 quadrants that you needed to draw out, you could stop here and start drawing out your pattern. Now, because we want to get to 16 blocks, oopsie, like this one, we need to break this quadrant down even further. So what we're going to do then is, just like we found the middle of this board, of the whole board, we want to find the middle of this quadrant. So we're going to line our ruler up to each edge where that meets the edge, where the lines meet the edge. And then we're just going to mark where it crosses this one. And then from there, we can use that mark, place our T-square down again, making sure it's even with this edge, and that it bisects through that intersection. We'll draw a line across. All right. So now what has happened, because we've been drawn that line, it's now created another intersection here. So we don't need to try and find the middle of this one. This is the middle of it. It's determined by drawing that line. So I'll just show you now a way to use a carpenter square if this is all you have, if you don't have quilting rulers, but maybe you or your partner has this out in the shop. So likewise, you line up the edge, line it up to intersect, or to go through where that intersects. Draw a line straight across. So now I'm just going to continue around the board, because now that we've drawn that one, it's created another intersection here. And then of course that has created an intersection there as well. All right, so there we have now 16 squares. So it's 4 across and 4 down, so 16. So if this were the block that you were drawing, this is where you would stop, and then you can start to draw out your pattern. And I usually suggest drawing your pattern with pencil. So do your grid in a highlighter that you can wash off with a damp cloth, but use draw your pattern, that is the block design you're doing, in pencil. So if you want to break this down, this quadrant here, this square in the upper corner, I guess in the camera it's probably the lower corner, but either way it has a diagonal going this way. So with your pencil you would draw a diagonal that way. Now, if you are doing a pattern that needs 64 squares, you're going to have to take it one step further. So, just like we did before in determining where the center of this quadrant it was, we're going to determine where the center of this square is. Again, lining up the edge, the ruler with where it meets the edge, and just mark the center point. Now that'll give us an intersection to draw this line, basically all the way around, but it won't cover the inside. So we need to also determine the center of this square. So again, lining up where the lines meet, and in the middle, just mark off where it intersects. So then we take the T-square. It doesn't matter which direction you do it, this way or the opposite way. Doesn't matter which side. And as you can see, this ruler has no markings, measurements on it. So draw a line through each of those intersections, both going crosswise and also up and down. And then each time we draw one of these lines, we're actually creating other intersections in the adjoining quadrant. So you can just continue around the board. Every time you see where there's an intersection, that's an indicator that's your marker to draw a horizontal line. All right, so there we have it. Now we have a board with 64 equal squares, and we didn't do any measuring, we didn't do any math, and it's very quick and easy. Now from here, then you just start drawing out your pattern. Again, you would follow along with your corresponding squares. So the first 3 at the top here, you can see, are blank squares basically, and then you have a half square triangle. So you would draw a diagonal across, and you'd work your way. Everybody approaches this a little differently. You might do it row by row, you might start in the middle and work your way out, but this will give you a map to tell you exactly where you are on your pattern and what the line in that area should look like. So I hope you enjoyed this video today. I will be making others, because not every grid is, not every pattern is based on a grid that is 4 by 4 or 8 by 8. Some are 9 by 9, 10 by 10, 6 by 6, and so on. So I will be doing future videos to show you exactly how to do those, also with no math. So please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Facebook. That's where I'm most active. And if you have any questions, by all means, pop me an email or a comment. Thank you.